There's a particular kind of foolishness that gets women killed in the wild. It's called compassion, the inability to look away from suffering, even when looking means dying yourself. Elara had survived 700 days in the Shadowlands by killing every soft impulse that made her human. She buried her scent under sage and ash, walked only where snow would hide her tracks, and learned to eat her meals cold so smoke wouldn't betray her location. She'd become a ghost. It should have been enough. But on the night the great whiteout buried the forest in white silence, she heard something that undid all 700 days of discipline in a single moment. The sound of a dying animal's whimper, and Elara, fool that she was, opened her door. They say compassion is what separates us from beasts. Elara would learn that night that sometimes compassion is exactly what delivers you into a beast's jaws. Chapter 1. The blizzard hit like a fist, stealing the air from Elara's lungs. Wind howled through the Shadowlands with a voice that sounded almost human, almost like screaming. She tasted the storm coming hours ago, that metallic bite on her tongue that meant the great whiteout, the storm that buried the forest once every decade and left nothing alive in its wake. Inside her cabin, Elara moved through her pre-storm ritual with the precision of someone who knew that one mistake meant death. Firewood stacked within arm's reach of the hearth, 3 clay jugs of water lined against the wall, stoppered tight. Dried venison and wild onions hanging from the rafters. Every crack in the log wall stuffed with moss and packed mud, sealed against the cold that could kill as surely as any predator. The single window was already shuttered, the heavy oak bar dropped across the door. This cabin, barely more than a hunter's shack, abandoned years before she claimed it, had kept her hidden for exactly 700 days. She counted every one. 700 nights of sleeping with her mother's skinning knife under the pillow she'd stuffed with dried grass. 700 mornings of checking the perimeter for tracks, for broken branches, for any sign that someone had found her. 700 days of being no one, needing nothing, surviving on silence and snowmelt and the small, bitter victories of another sunrise. The Shadowlands were forbidden territory, too dangerous, the packs said. Too wild, where rogues went to die and their bones bleached white under trees that had never known an axe. Elara had learned to love it here. Loneliness was safer than company. Cold was more honest than warmth. And the forest kept its secrets as well as she kept hers. She banked the fire low, just enough to keep from freezing, not enough to send smoke signals through the storm, and wrapped herself in the threadbare wool blanket that served as her only luxury. It still smelled faintly of her mother. Lavender and wood smoke and the particular sweetness of compassion that had gotten her killed. "Don't be like me," her mother had gasped, her life bleeding out through the wound in her side. The stranger she'd tried to help standing over her, knife red and eyes empty. "Learn to look away, Elara. Promise me." Elara had promised, had meant it even. She was still lying. The storm's voice grew louder, shaking the cabin's bones. Snow drove against the shutters like thrown stones. This would last days. She had provisions. She had shelter. She would outlast it the way she'd outlasted everything else, by becoming smaller, quieter, by needing less than survival required and nothing more. Then she heard it. A sound that cut through the wind's howl like a blade through silk, high and thin and desperate. The unmistakable whimper of something dying. Close. Too close. Maybe 10 feet from her door. Elara's body went rigid, every muscle locking. Her breath stopped in her chest. She stared at the door as if she could see through the wood to whatever was dying on the other side. "Not my problem," she told herself, her hands fisting in the blanket. "The forest is full of things that die. Let nature take its course." The whimper came again, weaker, fading like a candle in wind. Her mother's voice in her memory. Pathological compassion, the healers called it, said it was a sickness of the soul, this inability to witness pain without trying to fix it. She'd laughed, bitter and knowing. They were right. It'll kill me someday. It had, and Elara had spent 700 days trying not to let it kill her too. The dying sound came a third time, barely audible, a final breath shaping itself into a plea. Then silence. "It's dead," Elara thought, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. Already gone, too late anyway. She stayed frozen by the fire, watching the flames twist and dance, telling herself she'd made the right choice, the smart choice, the only choice that let you survive when survival was all you had left. 1 minute passed. 5, 10. The cabin was silent except for the storm, the wind, her own heartbeat too loud in her ears. Elara lasted 15 minutes before she was on her feet, moving toward the door, her hands already reaching for her cloak. "Damn you," she whispered, to her mother, to herself, to whatever god of fools watched over women who couldn't learn. Damn it all. The oak bar lifted with a sound like judgment. The door swung open. The blizzard exploded into the cabin, a wall of white and cold and howling fury that drove her back a step before she forced herself forward into it. The cold bit through her cloak in seconds, stealing feeling from her face, her hands, turning her breath to ice in her lungs. She could barely see past her own outstretched arm. Snow drove sideways, each flake a tiny knife, the wind trying to tear her from her feet. She stumbled forward, following the memory of where the sound had been. 3 steps, 5, 10. There, a shape in the snow, dark against endless white. She'd expected a deer, maybe an elk, injured and lost from its herd. Not this. The wolf was massive. Bigger than any wolf she'd ever seen. Bigger than any wolf had a right to be. Its body sprawled across the snow like a felled tree. Midnight black fur matted with ice and something darker that steamed slightly in the frigid air. Blood. The smell hit her even through the storm. Copper and iron and something chemical, something wrong. It wasn't moving. For a heartbeat, Elara thought she was too late, that she'd destroyed her safety for something already dead. Then she saw its ribs expand, shallow, labored, stopping and starting like a stuttering heart. Alive, barely. She dropped to her knees beside it, the snow soaking through her dress instantly, her hands hovering over its flank. Even unconscious, even dying, it was terrifying. This close, she could see the true size of it. Its paws were massive as her own face, claws like iron spikes half buried in the snow. Its muzzle, slack in unconsciousness, revealed teeth made for tearing, long and curved and white as bone. This wasn't a normal wolf. This was an alpha. Maybe more. Maybe Lycan, the old blood, the first shifters, larger and stronger and more dangerous than any modern pack wolf. Turn around, her survival instinct screamed. Close the door, bar it. Let the storm take it. This is how you die. But her hands were already moving, assessing the wounds with the trained efficiency her mother had drilled into her. 3 deep slashes across its side, edges ragged as if made by claws rather than fangs. A puncture wound near its shoulder, still bleeding sluggishly, the snow around it stained dark. The blood smelled wrong. Metallic, yes, but chemical too, bitter and acrid. Poison. She'd bet her life on it. The wolf's breathing hitched. Stopped. Started again with a sound like tearing cloth. Time was running out. Elara grabbed the wolf's front legs, wrapping her arms around them, and pulled. The body might as well have been made of stone. Dead weight, 200 pounds, maybe more. Her boots slipped in the snow, her small frame straining against impossible mass. Her muscles screamed protest. 1 foot. She'd moved it 1 foot. The cabin door was 10 feet away. It might as well have been miles. Leave it, something rational whispered. Save yourself. You tried. No one could ask for more. But she could ask more. She always had. Elara set her feet, wrapped her arms tighter around those massive legs, and pulled with everything she had. Her voice rose in a desperate chant, barely audible over the wind. Come on. Come on. Don't you dare die on me. Not after. She gasped for air, pulled harder. After I came out here like an idiot. 2 feet. 3. Her hands were numb, her face burning with cold. 4 feet. 5. The storm was trying to bury them both. Snow piled against the wolf's body, against her legs, making each step harder. 6 feet. 7. She was sobbing now, half from effort, half from cold, her lungs burning with each frozen breath. 8 feet. 9. With a final, desperate heave that tore something in her shoulder, Elara dragged the wolf across her threshold. They collapsed together just inside the doorway, her body half covering the beast's massive head, both of them gasping in the sudden relative silence. For a moment she just lay there, feeling the wolf's faint breath against her throat, warm, alive, and the frantic hammer of her own heart. Then reality crashed back like a second storm. She'd just left a blood trail. A clear, obvious path from wherever this creature had been to her door. Anyone tracking it, and something this large, this valuable, would be tracked, would find her cabin. Find her. 700 days of caution. Destroyed. For a dying wolf. What have I done? But the wolf was still dying, its heartbeat stuttering under her palm where it rested against its chest. Whatever came next, she had to deal with now first. Elara shoved herself upright on shaking legs, kicked the door shut against the storm, and stared down at the massive predator bleeding on her floor. Its breathing was getting worse, more labored. Black blood, not red, black, seeped from the shoulder wound onto her wooden floor. Definitely poison. Definitely dying. She had maybe hours, maybe less. "You'd better be worth it," she whispered, already moving toward her herb stores, her hands steady despite everything because this, at least, she knew how to do. Survive, save what could be saved, deal with the consequences after. It was all she'd ever known how to do. Chapter 2. Elara woke to wrongness. Not danger. She'd learned to recognize danger in her sleep, the particular quality of air that meant predator nearby. This was different. The air felt charged, electric, tasting of ozone and something wild that made her prey instincts scream despite having no wolf to give them shape. The fire had died to embers, casting the cabin in deep shadow. The storm still raged outside. She could hear it battering the shutters, but inside, the silence felt thick enough to choke on. Too warm. The cabin was too warm. She'd banked the fire low before falling asleep. The temperature should have dropped hours ago. Instead, heat radiated from somewhere, pressing against her skin like a fever. Elara's eyes snapped fully open. The wolf was gone. Where the massive black creature had lain, where she'd spent hours cleaning wounds, stitching torn flesh, packing injuries with poultices made from her precious store of herbs, now lay a man. Naked, sprawled face down across her floor as if he'd fallen from a great height. His body took up the entire space between her fireplace and door, too large for her small cabin, all lean muscle and bronze skin marked with scars that told stories of violence survived. For 3 heartbeats, Elara couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Her mind tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Shifter, of course. The wolf had been too large. Too wrong. But shifters controlled their transformations. They didn't shift unconsciously. Not unless... Her eyes found the mark between his shoulder blades. A tattoo. Black ink stark against his skin. A crown wrapped in thorns. The thorns dripping what looked like blood. The whole design radiating authority and threat in equal measure. The mark of the royal line. The mark of the Alpha King. Ice flooded Elara's veins, colder than the storm outside. Her hand moved automatically, finding the knife she kept under her pillow. Fingers wrapping around the hilt so tight they ached. She'd saved King Kalen, the Wolf of War. The man who decreed 2 years ago that unmated Omegas must choose, bind to an alpha of the pack's choosing, or die. No exceptions, no mercy. The man she'd been hiding from for 700 days. Now he was in her cabin, unconscious, vulnerable. She could kill him, should kill him. One slash across the throat, deep enough to sever the artery. He'd bleed out in minutes, and every rogue Omega in the territory would be safer for it. The knife trembled in her hand. Do it. One cut. Freedom for thousands. But her arm wouldn't move. Pathological compassion, her mother had called it. The inability to witness suffering without trying to fix it, even when the suffering belonged to someone who deserved it. Even when killing him would be justice. Damn it, she whispered, backing toward the far wall, knife raised, putting as much distance between them as her small cabin allowed. That's when his eyes opened. Not slowly, not the gradual return of consciousness. One moment closed, the next open and aware, glowing gold in the dim light. Not human eyes, wolf eyes in a human face, burning with ancient predatory focus that made every hair on her body stand on end. He didn't move. Just watched her with those impossible eyes, his body still, his breathing controlled despite the wound she'd stitched holding him together. Elara's back hit the wall, nowhere left to run. Her knife felt suddenly, pathetically small against whatever was looking at her through Kaylin's face. "You..." His voice scraped out like stones grinding together, forced through a throat not quite meant for speech. He paused, nostrils flaring, scenting the air. His pupils dilated, the gold of his eyes brightened, burning hotter. "You smell." He inhaled deeper, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, possession, hunger that had nothing to do with food. "Like mine." The words landed like a physical blow, not a question, a claim, an instinct voiced before thought could temper it. Mate. He was claiming mate bond, here, now, with her. "Stay back," Elara managed, her voice breaking. The knife shook so badly she had to use both hands to keep it raised. "I know who you are. I know what you've done." Kaylin's eyes tracked the movement of the blade with the lazy interest of a cat watching a mouse. No fear, not even concern. He tried to push himself up, muscles bunching, arms straining. Got halfway to his knees before his body convulsed. He gasped, a sound caught between pain and rage, and collapsed back to the floor. His hands slapped against the wood, claws extending involuntarily, scoring deep gouges in the planks. Claws. He still had claws despite being human-shaped. The shift wasn't complete, or couldn't complete. "Impossible," he growled, staring at his own hands as if they'd betrayed him. He tried again to rise, same result. His body refused to obey, muscles spasming before giving out entirely. For the first time, something other than predatory focus entered his expression. Confusion. Then, quickly masked but there, fear. Elara had seen enough wounded animals to recognize what she was looking at. He wasn't just injured. He was dying faster than his shifter healing could compensate for. "You're poisoned," she said, professional training overriding terror for just a moment. "Wolfsbane and silver nitrate, if I'm reading the symptoms right." His eyes snapped to hers, gold burning. "How long ago?" The question came out harsh, demanding, despite his prone position. "I found you hours ago. You were already..." She stopped. "How long since you were stabbed?" 3 days. The words came out bitter. "During council. Blade to the back." 3 days. He should be dead. Wolfsbane alone killed in 24 hours. Add silver nitrate to stop shifter healing, and nothing survived past 12 hours. "Why aren't you dead?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kaylin's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Alpha King bloodline. Harder to kill than common wolves." He coughed and black blood spattered his lips. "But I'm getting there." The black blood. She'd seen it on the wolf, thought it was the poison making it dark. But this was different. This was internal bleeding, organs failing, death eating him from the inside. "Who did this?" she asked, needing to know what was coming for them both. "My beta." He spat the word like poison. "Vorik. Ambitious bastard wants the throne." Elara's blood turned to ice. Vorik. She knew that name. Every rogue knew that name. The beta who collected Omega pelts as trophies. Who made his kills last days. Who took pleasure in breaking things that couldn't fight back. If Vorik had poisoned the king, he'd come to confirm the death. To make sure his coup succeeded. He'd follow the blood trail. The one leading straight to her door. "Oh gods," Elara breathed, looking at the dark smears across her floor, the path from door to where Kaylin lay. "He's coming here." Kaylin's eyes never left her face. "Yes, he's tracking my blood. When he finds me dead, Those gold eyes seemed to see straight through her. He'll burn this forest to ash, and you with it. The knife in her hand felt even more useless now. What was one blade against a beta and whatever forces he'd bring? So, Kalen said, his voice dropping lower, taking on an edge that was part threat, part negotiation. Here's your choice, little Omega. You can let me die and face Vorik alone. Or you can keep me alive, and I'll protect you from him. He smiled, and it was a terrible thing. All teeth and predatory promise. Choose your monster. Chapter 3. Elara stared at the dying king on her floor and did the math. Vorik was coming, that was certain. The blood trail led straight here, and betas didn't leave loose ends, especially not loose ends that could challenge their claim to a stolen throne. If Kalen died, she'd face Vorik alone. One Omega with a skinning knife against a beta and however many soldiers he'd bring. She'd seen what Vorik did to rogues. The pelts he wore weren't clean kills. If Kalen lived, she had an alpha king who owed her a life debt. Or would kill her for being a rogue Omega the moment he recovered enough strength. Both choices ended in her death. She just got to pick which monster delivered it. How long? Kalen's voice cut through her calculations, rough but demanding despite his prone position. How long until Vorik arrives? Elara looked toward the shuttered window, listening to the storm. The great whiteout lasts 3 to 4 days. No one travels in this, not even a beta. So we have 3 days. His gold eyes never left her face. To heal me, or to run. I can't carry you, she said flatly. And you can't walk. Then you have a choice to make, little Omega. The endearment, if it could be called that, made her jaw clench. Don't call me that. What should I call you then? His lips quirked, a ghost of amusement that shouldn't exist on a dying man's face. The woman holding my life in her hands? Elara. The name felt like a weapon, given freely. If he lived, he'd hunt her anyway. If he died, it wouldn't matter. My name is Elara. Elara. He tested it, his voice turning it into something that sounded almost like a caress. I am Kalen. Though you seem to already know that. Everyone knows the Wolf of War. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. You made sure of it. The decree 2 years ago, bind or die. Very memorable. Something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt. Not quite regret. The law was meant to protect Omegas from being unclaimed. Pack hierarchy requires. I know what it requires. Elara cut him off, years of suppressed rage bleeding through. My pack alpha wanted me as third mate. I refused. He declared me rogue. She met those burning gold eyes without flinching. Your law gave him that power, so forgive me if I'm not eager to save the man who signed my death warrant. Kalen was silent for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. And yet, he said softly, you brought me inside, stitched my wounds. You could have left me to die in the snow. I'm a fool, Elara said simply. My mother called it pathological compassion. It got her killed. It'll probably get me killed too. Not if I live. The words were a promise and a threat tangled together. Help me survive Vorik, and I'll make sure you never have to hide again. Your word means nothing to me. Then consider it a bargain. His claws scraped against the wood, deliberate, reminding her what he was even prone and poisoned. Your skill for my protection. Life for life. By the old laws, that's binding. The old laws. Pre-pack, pre-civilization, when shifters ran wild and bargains made in blood held more weight than any modern decree. If she agreed, she'd be bound to him. Not as mate, that was different, involuntary, the thing his instincts had already claimed. This would be choice. Contract. Her expertise in exchange for his strength. It was insane. He was dying, possibly too far gone to save. And even if she succeeded, he was still the Alpha King. Still the man whose laws had made her a fugitive. But he was also her only shield against Vorik. If I do this, Elara said slowly, each word carefully chosen, and you survive, you don't get to claim me as mate. Whatever your instincts say, I'm not yours. This is business, nothing more. Kaylin's eyes flashed, gold brightening with something that might have been anger or might have been hunger. The mate bond isn't something either of us chose. It exists whether we acknowledge it or not. Then we don't acknowledge it. Her voice was steel. Those are my terms. Take them or die alone. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Pride warred with pragmatism across his features, the alpha in him bristling at being dictated to by an omega. Then he smiled, slow and dangerous. Done, for now. The for now hung between them like a blade waiting to fall. But Elara had bought herself space, time. A chance to survive the storm, Vorik, and whatever came after. She set the knife down, not far, still within reach, and moved toward him. On your stomach. I need to see the wound that's killing you. Kaylin shifted with visible effort, rolling onto his front, exposing the scarred landscape of his back. Between his shoulder blades, nestled among the thorns of his tattoo, was the puncture wound. Smaller than she'd expected for something so lethal, but the flesh around it was black, veins spreading dark like cracks in ice. Silver poisoning. The metal was still inside, stopping his body from healing, spreading toxins with every heartbeat. This is going to hurt, she warned. Everything hurts. His voice was muffled against his arm. Do what needs doing. Elara retrieved her knife, the same one she'd considered killing him with minutes ago, and held the blade in the fire until it glowed red. She had no anesthetic, no way to numb the pain of what she was about to do. She'd have to cut the silver out. Don't shift, she said, kneeling beside him, the hot knife hovering over infected flesh. If you shift, you'll die. If you fight me, I'll stop and you'll die. Understand? Understood. She pressed the blade to his skin and began to cut. Kaylin's entire body went rigid, muscles locking, tendons standing out like ropes. A sound escaped him, not quite a scream, not quite a growl, something caught between human pain and animal fury. His claws extended fully, gouging the floorboards. His spine arched. But he didn't shift, didn't fight, didn't pull away. Elara worked quickly, efficiently, cutting away necrotic tissue, hunting for the shard of silver buried deep in muscle. Black blood welled around her fingers, hot and viscous and wrong. There, she felt the edge of it, a sliver of metal no bigger than her thumbnail, lodged between vertebrae. Found it. She breathed. Hold still. One more. She dug the knife point under the shard and pried. The silver came free with the wet sound that would haunt her dreams. Kaylin made a noise that was pure agony, his whole body convulsing once before going terrifyingly still. For a heartbeat, Elara thought she'd killed him. Then she saw his ribs expand, breath returning in ragged gasps. Out. He managed. Is it out? It's out. She dropped the silver shard into her water basin, watching it hiss and steam. The metal was dark, corroded, coated in poison and flesh. Now I need to clean the wound and... No time. Kaylin pushed himself up on his elbows, movements jerky and weak but determined. The antidote. Do you have charcoal, bitter root, ash bark? Elara blinked. You know herbalism? Kings don't stay kings by being ignorant. He coughed, and this time the blood on his lips was red, not black. Progress. The antidote will burn, but it'll stop the poison from spreading. She had the ingredients, had been planning to use them herself, but hearing him name them, knowing he understood what was coming, made the choice feel less like torture and more like partnership. I'll mix it, she said, already moving to her herb stores. But you're right, it's going to burn. Good. Kaylin's voice was fading, exhaustion and blood loss catching up. Pain means living. I'll take pain over nothing. Elara mixed the paste, charcoal ground fine, bitter root crushed to pulp, ash bark powder, all bound with just enough water to make it spreadable. The mixture smoked in the bowl, reactive and caustic, the kind of remedy that cured by being almost as deadly as the disease. She packed it directly into the open wound. Kaylin's scream was a living thing, tearing through the cabin, making the storm outside seem quiet by comparison. His body thrashed, fighting instinct, fighting the agony of poison and cure warring in his flesh. Smoke actually rose from the wound where silver residue met the antidote, flesh burning, cleaning, purging. Elara held him down with both hands on his shoulders, her slight weight nothing compared to his strength, but he wasn't fighting her. He was fighting himself, fighting the shift that would kill him, fighting unconsciousness that would stop his heart. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice cutting through his pain. "Stay human. Stay alive. That's an order, Your Majesty." His wild eyes found hers, gold bleeding back to human brown for just a heartbeat. "Elara," he breathed, her name a tether. Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp beneath her hands. Chapter 4. Night fell, and with it came the fever. Elara had wrapped Kalen's wound, dragged him closer to the fire, and covered him with every blanket she owned. It wasn't enough. Heat rolled off his body in waves, his skin burning to the touch, his breathing shallow and rapid. She'd seen this before in animals poisoned by silver, the body trying to burn out the toxin, temperature spiking so high it could cook the brain if left unchecked. She had to cool him down. But not too much. The storm outside was deadly cold, and his body needed the fire to fight. Balance, always balance. Elara filled her last clean bowl with snow from outside, a 30-second trip that left her gasping and half frozen, and began the work of keeping him alive. She stripped away the blankets covering his upper body, leaving his legs covered for modesty and warmth. His torso was a furnace, muscles twitching with fever dreams, scars catching the firelight like a map of violence survived. The crown and thorns tattoo seemed to move in the flickering light, the thorns reaching, the crown pressing down. She dampened a cloth in the melted snow and wiped his face, his neck, his shoulders. The water steamed where it touched him. "You're burning up," she murmured, more to herself than him. "Of course you are, because nothing can be simple." His eyes moved beneath their lids, rapid and frantic. Dreaming or hallucinating, she couldn't tell. His lips moved, shaping words she couldn't hear. She leaned closer, cloth poised to wipe his brow again. "Traitor," Kalen breathed, the words shaped with such hatred it made her flinch. Should have seen, should have known. Vorik, he was reliving the betrayal. "He's not here," Elara said softly, instinct making her gentle when she'd sworn to stay distant. "You're safe, for now." His head tossed, rejecting comfort. No one is safe, made them fear, kept them alive. The fever was stripping away his masks, showing her the man beneath the crown. And apparently, the man beneath the crown believed fear was safety. Maybe it had been, for him. "You can't rule through fear forever," she told him, knowing he couldn't hear her, saying it anyway. "Eventually, someone fears you enough to try killing you first." She wrung out the cloth, dampened it again, ran it down his arms. He had scars everywhere, claw marks on his ribs, a bite mark on his shoulder, what looked like a sword cut along his side. His body was a testament to survival through violence. Just like hers, in different ways. When she touched his forehead to check his temperature, his hand shot up, catching her wrist in a grip that was still too strong despite everything. His eyes opened, fever bright, not quite focused, more gold than brown. "Don't leave," he rasped. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, trying to tug free. "The storm." "Swear it." His grip tightened, not painful but unbreakable. "Swear you won't leave me alone." There was something in his voice that was less command and more plea, something vulnerable that shouldn't exist in an alpha king. "I swear," Elara heard herself say. "I won't leave you alone." His grip loosened, his eyes closed, but his hand slid from her wrist to her hand, fingers tangling with hers, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. She should pull away, should maintain distance, should remember what he was, what he'd done, what he'd cost her. Instead, she sat there, holding the hand of a dying king, and wondered when she'd become the kind of fool who saved monsters. The hours crawled past. She monitored his fever, wiped him down when it spiked, forced water between his lips when he'd swallow. She changed the dressing on his wound twice, checking for infection, for spreading black veins, for any sign the poison was winning. The wound was ugly but clean, red blood, not black. The flesh around it was inflamed but not necrotic. Progress. Somewhere past midnight, his fever broke. The terrifying heat eased, his breathing deepened, and his body finally relaxed into something resembling actual sleep. Elara's own exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She'd been awake for how long? Since yesterday morning? The storm had arrived at dusk. She dragged him inside. He'd shifted. She'd cut the silver out. The fever had raged for hours. She couldn't keep her eyes open anymore. Just for a moment, she thought. Just rest for a moment. She meant to move to her bed, to put distance between them. Instead, she slumped forward, her head coming to rest on her own arm, her hand still caught in his, too tired to pull away. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was his breathing, steady and deep and alive. Chapter 5. Elara woke to voices. No, a voice, singular. Kaylin's voice, rough and low, speaking to someone who wasn't there. She lifted her head, neck aching from sleeping folded over, and found him still asleep but restless. The fever had returned, though not as fierce as before. His skin was flushed, his breathing uneven, his eyes moving rapidly beneath their lids. And he was talking. "Wasn't supposed to be like this," he murmured, his voice younger somehow, less weighted with authority. "Father said fear keeps them loyal. Fear keeps them alive." Elara should wake him, should shake him back to reality. Instead, she stayed quiet, listening to the fever strip away his defenses. Wanted to be different, wanted to be better. His jaw clenched. But better gets you killed. Mercy gets you betrayed. His hand spasmed, reaching for something that wasn't there. Mother she would have known what to do. Before they. He stopped, the words choking off, and for a moment his face twisted with something that looked like grief. "I'm sorry," Elara whispered, not sure if she was apologizing for eavesdropping or for whatever had happened to his mother, probably both. His eyes opened, brown this time, not gold, but unfocused, not quite seeing her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice carrying the confusion of fever. "Elara, the woman who's keeping you alive, remember?" Elara. He tested the name again, like he hadn't heard it before. "You smell like moonlight and something wild, freedom." The fever was making him poetic. It would be amusing if it weren't so dangerous. "You need to drink," she said, reaching for the water skin. "Can you sit up?" With her help, he managed to prop himself against the wall, movements clumsy but determined. She held the water to his lips, and he drank like a man crawling out of a desert. "Better?" she asked when he'd finished. He nodded, but his eyes were too bright, his skin still too hot. The fever wasn't done with him yet. "Tell me something," he said, the words slightly slurred. "Why did you run, really?" "I told you, my alpha." "No." He shook his head, immediately regretted it based on how he winced. "That's what happened. I'm asking why. You're a healer, valuable. Your pack would have protected that skill." "Protected the skill, maybe. Not me." Elara sat back, putting distance between them. "My mother was pack healer before me. She taught me everything. Plants, poisons, how to see what's wrong and fix it." She looked at her hands, remembering. "When she died, the alpha wanted me as third mate, said I'd be safe there, that he'd take care of me." Her laugh was bitter. He had 2 mates already, both terrified of him, both covered in bruises they claimed came from training accidents. Kaylin's eyes sharpened despite the fever. He beat them. He controlled them, beat them when they stepped out of line, called it keeping order. Her hands fisted in her lap. He told me I should be grateful, that unmated Omegas were in danger and he was offering protection. "So you ran." "So I ran." She met his gaze. "Because I'd rather die free than live as someone's property." Silence settled between them, heavy with understanding. "I made that decree to stop alphas from abandoning Omegas," Kaylin said quietly, "from leaving them vulnerable to rogues, to other packs. I thought force bonds were better than no bonds." "You thought wrong." No heat in her voice, just fact. "You gave alphas legal right to claim any Omega they wanted. You called it protection. They called it ownership. I see that now. His eyes closed, exhaustion or shame or both. I see a lot of things now that I didn't before. Funny how almost dying gives you perspective. His lips quirked. The universe has a sick sense of humor. If the universe had a sense of humor, you'd have landed at someone else's door, someone who actually likes you. But then I wouldn't have found my mate. The words were quiet, almost wondering, with none of the possessive claim from before. We're not talking about that. Why not? It's real. You feel it too, whether you want to or not. Elara wanted to deny it, wanted to say he was delusional with fever, but she'd felt it when he'd grabbed her wrist earlier. That pull, that recognition, that sense of something clicking into place. She'd just been ignoring it with everything she had. Feeling something doesn't mean acting on it, she said finally. We made a bargain, business, that's all this is. For now, he said again, that same dangerous promise from before. Forever, she countered. His smile was sad. You say that now, but the bond doesn't fade, Elara. It only grows stronger. Then I'll grow stronger too. She stood, needing distance, needing air that didn't taste like smoke and fever and complicated things she didn't want to name. You should rest. The fever will spike again soon. You'll need your strength. Elara. Her name stopped her at the edge of the firelight. Thank you for not leaving, for not letting me die alone. The gratitude was genuine this time, no arrogance, no expectation, just honest thanks from one survivor to another. Don't thank me yet, she said, echoing her words from when she'd first dragged him inside. We still have to survive Vorik. We will. Certainty rang in his voice despite the fever, despite the poison still working through his system. I don't lose, Elara, not to traitors and not to death. She wanted to believe him, wanted that certainty to be more than fever dreams and arrogance. Instead, she just nodded and turned back to keeping watch over a king who smelled like moonlight and spoke of bonds she couldn't afford to acknowledge. Outside, the storm howled on. Inside, something fragile and dangerous was beginning to take root. Chapter 6. Morning of the third day brought change. Elara woke to find Kalen sitting upright, his back against the wall, watching her with eyes that were clear and sharp and far too aware. Not fevered, not dying, just awake. How long have you been staring at me? She asked, pulling her blanket tighter around herself, suddenly conscious of how close they'd been sleeping. Her hands still tingled where his had held it through the night. An hour, maybe 2. No apology in his voice. Just statement of fact. You talk in your sleep. Heat flooded her face. I do not. You do. His lips quirked. Something about sage and ash, and not being found. You were dreaming about hiding. Because she was always dreaming about hiding. 2 years of running didn't leave your subconscious easily. How are you feeling? She asked, deflecting, already assessing him with trained eyes. His color was better, bronze instead of gray. His breathing was steady and deep. The wound on his back, when she checked it last night, had been healing at the accelerated rate shifters were known for. Stronger. He pushed himself to standing with only slight effort, and suddenly the cabin felt smaller, much smaller. He towered over her, filling the space between fire and door, all lean muscle and coiled strength barely contained in human skin. The blanket she'd given him was wrapped around his waist, modesty barely, leaving his scarred torso exposed to the firelight. Elara stood too, needing to not be at a disadvantage, but it didn't help. He was still a head taller, still radiating heat and power and that indefinable thing that made wolves instinctively recognize dominance. You should eat, she said, moving toward her supplies, needing to do something with her hands. You've been living on water and spite for 3 days. Your body needs... Her words cut off as he moved, faster than she'd expected from someone barely off his deathbed. One moment she was reaching for the dried meat, the next he was there, his hand on the wall beside her head, caging her in without touching. Not threatening, just present, overwhelming, undeniable. Elara. Her name in his voice did things to her pulse that she refused to acknowledge. We need to talk about what happens when the storm ends. What happens is we survive Vorik, she said, keeping her voice steady, refusing to back down despite every instinct screaming at her to submit to the predator looming over her. That was the deal. The deal was I protect you. I will, but... His eyes searched hers, brown now with just flickers of gold, human but not quite. Where do you go after? Back to hiding? Back to running? That's not your concern. It is when you're my mate. We agreed not to discuss that. No, you declared we wouldn't discuss it. I never agreed. He leaned closer and she could smell him, smoke and leather and something wild that made her wolfless instincts respond anyway. The bond exists whether you acknowledge it or not. I feel it. You feel it. Pretending otherwise is... Survival, she cut him off, finally looking directly into those too aware eyes. I've been running for 2 years, Kaylin. 2 years of being hunted, of sleeping with a knife, of trusting no one. You want me to suddenly trust you? The man whose law made me a fugitive. I want you to see that I'm trying to be better than that law. His hand lifted from the wall, hovering near her face but not touching, asking permission he hadn't asked before. I want you to understand that what I feel for you isn't about ownership or control. It's about... The cabin door rattled violently, shaking on its hinges. They both froze. Not the storm. The storm was steady wind and driving snow. This was deliberate. Something was testing the door. Kaylin's demeanor changed instantly. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the predator she'd glimpsed in his eyes that first night. His claws extended with a sound like knives being drawn. "Get behind me," he ordered, voice dropping to a growl. "It's my cabin." "Behind me." The door rattled again, then a voice, carried through the wood, high and mocking and wrong. "I know you're in there, little mouse. I can smell your fear from here." Vorik. But that was impossible. The storm was still raging outside. No one could track through the great whiteout. No one was that determined, that capable, that... He brought wolves, Kaylin said quietly, nostrils flaring, reading scents she couldn't detect. At least 6, maybe more. They can scent through weather. How did he find us so fast? The blood trail I left is 3 days old, but I'm still bleeding. Slowly, but enough. His eyes never left the door. He has hunters with him, real hunters, the kind that can follow a single drop of blood across miles. The door rattled a 3rd time, harder now. Testing the oak bar, testing the strength of the frame. "We can negotiate," Vorik's voice called, false and sweet. "Send out the king's body, and I'll let you live. You're just a rogue, yes? Not your fight, not your problem." Elara looked at Kaylin, saw the absolute certainty in his face that Vorik was lying. If she opened that door, they'd both die. Maybe her first, maybe him, but both for certain. "We need a plan," she whispered. "I need a weapon," Kaylin answered, "and you need to hide." "I'm not hiding while you fight 6 wolves." "You can't fight 6 wolves. Statement of fact, not insult." "Neither can you. You're barely healed." His smile was all teeth. "Then we'd better hope I'm more stubborn than they are vicious." Another voice joined Vorik's, deeper, uncertain. "Beta, the storm's getting worse. We should shelter and wait for..." "We wait for nothing." Vorik's snarl carried clearly. "He's dying in there. I can smell it. We go in now, finish this, and I'll be crowned king by sundown." The door shook again, harder. The oak bar held, but for how much longer? Kaylin turned to Elara, his hands coming to her shoulders, grip tight but not painful. "Listen very carefully. When they break through, not if, when, I'm going to shift. Full lichen. I'll take as many as I can, but some will get past me. Kaylin, you have your knife. Aim for the throat or the eyes. Nowhere else will stop a wolf fast enough. His eyes were bleeding gold now, the shift already beginning in response to threat. And if I tell you to run, I won't. If I tell you to run, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. You run, through the back window, into the storm, as far and as fast as you can. There is no back window. He looked at the wall behind her, then at her, then back at the wall. There will be, when I go through it. The door splintered, just a crack, but enough to let in a blast of frigid air and the scent of wet fur and blood hunger. Last chance, little mouse, Vorich called. Send him out, or we come in. Elara made her decision. She grabbed her knife from where she'd set it down, moved to stand beside Kaylin instead of behind him, and raised the blade. Together, she said. His eyes met hers, gold and fierce and something that might have been pride. Together. The door exploded inward. Chapter 7. The battle was chaos. 6 wolves poured through the shattered door, all teeth and claws and snarling fury. Kaylin shifted mid-lunge, bones cracking, fur erupting, his body expanding until the massive black lichen filled half the cabin. Elara had seen him as wolf before, but unconscious, dying. This was different. This was 9 feet of predator in full health, moving with speed that shouldn't be possible for something so large. He hit the first 2 wolves before they'd fully entered, claws tearing through fur and flesh, sending them flying back into the storm. His jaws closed on a third's throat, shook once, and dropped the body. 3 down in seconds, but 3 more were inside, spreading out, trying to flank him. And in the doorway, backlit by snow and malice, stood Vorich. Human-shaped, but wrong. His smile too wide, his eyes too bright, his whole presence radiating the kind of cruelty that enjoyed pain for its own sake. "The king lives!" he announced, voice carrying false delight. "How disappointing. And here I thought the poison would have finished you by now." Kaylin snarled, a sound that vibrated through the floor, through Elara's bones. He lunged for Vorich, and one of the flanking wolves hit Elara instead. She went down hard, her knife skittering across the floor, the wolf's weight crushing the air from her lungs. Teeth snapped inches from her throat. She got her arm up just in time, felt fangs sink into her forearm instead of her neck, pain exploding white-hot and immediate. Kaylin's roar shook the cabin. The wolf on top of her suddenly wasn't there anymore, torn away by 9 feet of enraged lichen who'd moved faster than physics should allow. The wolf hit the wall with a crack that meant broken bones, but the distraction cost him. The other 2 wolves hit Kaylin from both sides, bearing him down by sheer weight if not strength. Vorich laughed, high and delighted, and pulled a knife. Silver blade, obsidian handle, the same weapon that had started all of this. "Let's finish what we started, shall we?" He stepped fully into the cabin, boots crunching on splintered wood. Elara's arm was bleeding, pain radiating up to her shoulder, but she could move. She could fight. She scrambled for her knife, fingers closing around the hilt just as Vorich noticed her. "The rogue!" His attention snapped to her like a striking snake. "You're the one who's been keeping him alive. Stupid little mouse, you could have let him die and walked away free." Free. Elara pushed herself upright, knife raised, arms screaming. "You'd have killed me either way." "True." His grin widened. "But I'd have made it quick. Now I think I'll take my time." He moved toward her, and Kaylin exploded from beneath the 2 wolves with a strength born of pure fury. He didn't just throw them off, he shattered them, claws and teeth and primal violence that left nothing living in his wake. Then he turned to Vorich, and the temperature in the cabin dropped. The lichen that was Kaylin stood between Elara and the beta, blood dripping from his jaws, gold eyes burning with a rage that transcended reason. A growl built in his chest, low and continuous, a promise of death. "Oh, this will be fun," Vorich breathed, shifting mid-sentence, bones cracking as his own wolf emerged. Smaller than Kaylin's lichen form, but faster, leaner, built for killing rather than dominance. They clashed in the center of the cabin with a sound like thunder. Elara pressed herself against the wall, her injured arm clutched to her chest, watching with horrified fascination as two apex predators tried to kill each other in a space barely large enough for one. Kaelin had raw power. Vorik had silver and spite. Every time Kaelin's claws found purchase, Vorik twisted away, his silver knife flashing, leaving shallow cuts that smoked and burned. Every time Vorik lunged for a killing blow, Kaelin's sheer size and strength drove him back. But Kaelin was still recovering, still healing. The battle was taking its toll, his movements slowing, his breathing laboring, old wounds reopening under the strain. Vorik noticed. His laughter echoed through the cabin. "Getting tired, Your Majesty? Poison's still in your system, isn't it? Still dying, just slower." He lunged, not for Kaelin, but for Elara. The beta was fast, closing the distance before she could raise her knife, before she could scream, before Kaelin could react. Reality slowed. Elara saw Vorik's teeth aimed for her throat, saw his eyes, bright with the anticipation of her death, saw Kaelin turning, too far away, moving too slow. She was going to die. Something inside her snapped, not broke, transformed. Like a dam bursting, like a door flying open, like lightning finding ground. Power flooded through her, ancient and absolute, responding to threat with instinctive defense. Her voice cut through the chaos, and it wasn't her voice. It was older, bigger, carrying weight that had nothing to do with volume and everything to do with command. "Stop!" Vorik froze mid-lunge, his body locking, muscles seizing, as if invisible chains had wrapped around him. His eyes went wide with shock and confusion and, for the first time, fear. Kaelin froze too, his lichen form going rigid, fighting against the same compulsion. No, not the same. His resistance was different. He was fighting to move toward her, not away. Fighting to protect, not harm. "Vorik!" Elara heard herself say, her voice still carrying that impossible weight. "You will kneel." The beta's legs buckled. He went down hard, knees hitting the floor, his wolf form shimmering and failing as he was forced back to human. Naked, bleeding, kneeling before an omega with terror written across his face. What are you?" he gasped. Elara didn't know, didn't understand what had just happened. But she could feel it inside her, this power, this voice, waiting to be used again. "Someone you should have left alone," she said, and this time it was just her voice, small and scared and human. The power faded as fast as it had come, leaving her dizzy and weak and confused. Vorik felt it leave. His expression shifted from terror to calculation, to rage in the span of a heartbeat. He lunged. Kaelin's jaws closed around his throat. One bite. One shake. One broken body dropped to the floor and left still. The cabin fell silent except for heavy breathing and the storm's howl. Kaelin shifted back to human, slowly, painfully, his body covered in cuts and bites and reopened wounds. He swayed on his feet, caught himself against the wall, and looked at Elara with eyes that held equal parts confusion and awe. "What?" he managed, voice raw. "Was that?" "I don't know." Alara's legs gave out. She slid down the wall, landing in a heap, her arm throbbing, her whole body shaking with aftermath. "I don't know. He was going to kill me, and I—" Kaelin crossed the space between them in 2 strides, collapsing to his knees in front of her. His hands found her face, tilting it up, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You have voice," he breathed. "Alpha voice. Omegas aren't supposed to. It's not—" He stopped, started again. "That's older magic, rarer than mate bonds, rarer than anything." "I don't understand." "Neither do I." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, gentle despite the claws that hadn't fully retracted. "But you saved us both. Whatever that was, it stopped him long enough for me to." His words cut off as his eyes focused on her arm, on the blood soaking through her sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's fine." "It's not fine." He was already peeling back her sleeve with surprising gentleness, revealing the bite marks, deep and ugly and still bleeding. He got you. Damn it, he got you because I wasn't fast enough. You killed 5 wolves and a beta, Elara pointed out. I think you were fast enough. Not fast enough to stop him from hurting you. His voice dropped, rough with emotion she couldn't name. Not fast enough to keep you safe. I'm alive. You're alive. That's what matters. His eyes met hers, gold and brown swirling together, human and wolf in agreement for once. You're bleeding because of me, because I brought this to your door. I brought you to my door, she corrected. Literally, this was my choice. Elara. Her name was half plea, half prayer. His forehead came to rest against hers, careful of his still present fangs, his breath warm against her lips. I need to tell you something. Before I lose the nerve or the sense to keep it buried. Kaylin. I'm falling for you. The words tumbled out, raw and honest and terrifying. I don't know when it started. Maybe when you didn't kill me. Maybe when you held my hand through the fever. Maybe when you negotiated with me like an equal instead of a subject. But somewhere between dying and living, between monster and man, I fell for the woman who saved me when she had every reason to let me die. Elara's breath caught. She should pull back, should remind him of their deal, their boundaries, their agreement that this was business only. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "That's the fever talking." The fever broke 2 days ago. His hand slid into her hair, careful, asking permission with every movement. This is me talking. Kaylin, the man who's been fighting the mate bond because he knew you needed space, needed choice, needed freedom. But I can't fight both the bond and my own heart. We agreed. I know what we agreed. His lips were so close to hers now, breath mingling, heat building in the space between. And I'll honor it if you ask me to. If you tell me to step back, I will. If you tell me to leave you alone, I'll go. If you tell me you feel nothing, I'll find a way to live with it. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. But I need you to know that you belong to me, not as property, not as possession. You belong to me the way dawn belongs to the sky, the way breath belongs to living. Inevitable and essential and impossible to deny. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her lips with devastating gentleness. And if I'm wrong, if this is all one-sided, if the bond is just a trick of biology with no emotion behind it, tell me now. Tell me to stop and I will. Tell me to go, and I'll walk into the storm and never return. Elara should tell him to stop, should protect herself, should remember all the reasons why falling for an alpha king was the worst idea she'd ever had. Instead, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. His response was immediate and overwhelming, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that had been building since that first, "You smell like mine." The kiss was deep and consuming and desperate, tasting of blood and smoke and relief and something that might have been love if either of them were brave enough to name it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers again. "That's not a no," he murmured, voice rough and wondering. "It's not a yes either," she whispered back. "It's a maybe. It's a we'll see. It's a start." He kissed her again, softer this time, sweeter. "I'll take it." Outside, the storm began to break. Chapter 8. Dawn came with silence. The wind died sometime before first light, the howling fury that had trapped them together for 3 days simply stopping. The sudden quiet was eerie, like the world holding its breath. Elara woke wrapped in Kaylin's arms, her back against his chest, his warmth surrounding her like a shield. They'd collapsed together after the battle, too exhausted to care about propriety or boundaries or complicated feelings. Just survivors needing closeness, needing proof they both lived through the night. His breath stirred her hair. His heartbeat was steady against her spine. His arm was heavy across her waist, holding her close even in sleep. She should move. should put distance between them before this got more complicated than it already was. Instead, she let herself have one more moment. One more breath of safety before the real world returned. "You're awake," Kaylin murmured against her neck, voice rough with sleep. "So are you." "Have been for a while." His arm tightened slightly. "You sleep peacefully when you're not alone." "You've been watching me sleep again." "I've been watching you breathe, making sure you're real. Making sure last night wasn't fever dreams or dying hallucinations." He pressed his lips to her shoulder, barely a kiss, more acknowledgement. "Making sure I didn't imagine you standing between me and death with nothing but a knife and stubbornness." "I'm real." She turned in his arms to face him, found his eyes brown in the morning light, human and present and looking at her like she'd hung the stars. "We're both real. And we both survived. Because of you." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the dark circles under her eyes. "That thing you did, the voice, you saved us both." "I don't know what that was." "We'll figure it out." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then at her slight nod, her lips. Soft and sweet and nothing like the desperate claiming of last night.
Together. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Together implied future, implied partnership, implied choice being made instead of forced. "The storm's over," Elara said quietly. "I know. Which means we need to decide what happens next." "I know that too." He didn't let her go. "But first, I need to take care of your arm." She'd almost forgotten about the bite. Almost. The pain had faded to background throb, easy to ignore compared to everything else. But now that he mentioned it, she could feel it, deep and angry and probably infected. Kaylin sat up, bringing her with him, and gently took her injured arm in his hands. The bite marks were ugly, crusted with dried blood, the flesh around them swollen and hot. "It needs cleaning," he said, already moving toward her herb stores. "And stitching, and probably something for infection." "I can do it myself." "Let me." He looked back at her, and something in his expression made her fall silent. "Please, let me take care of you the way you took care of me." So she let him. Let him heat water, let him clean the wounds with gentle efficiency. Let him mix a poultice from her herbs with hands that knew what they were doing. Let him stitch the deeper tears with small, careful stitches that barely hurt. "Where did you learn this?" she asked, watching him work. "My mother." His hands never stopped moving. "Before she died, she taught me that kings should know how to heal as well as hurt. That power without mercy makes monsters." He tied off the last stitch. "I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. Started believing fear was the only language anyone understood." "What changed?" He looked up at her. "You. 3 days of watching someone choose compassion over survival. 3 days of being saved by someone who had every reason to let me die." He wrapped her arm in clean linen. "You reminded me that mercy isn't weakness. It's strength I'd forgotten I had." Elara's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to change you." "I know, but you have anyway." He tied off the bandage and brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "The question is, will you let me change too? Or will you run the moment we step outside that door?" There it was, the question she'd been avoiding since the storm started breaking. What happened next? She could run, could disappear back into the Shadowlands, back to her life of hiding and survival. He'd let her go. She believed that now. He'd honor her choice, even if it killed him. Or she could stay, could choose the terrifying possibility of future with an alpha king who kissed her like she was precious and looked at her like she was worth saving. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been running for so long, I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to trust that stopping won't get me killed or claimed or loved," he supplied quietly. She met his eyes. "That might be the scariest option of all." "I know." He pulled her close, arms wrapping around her, chin resting on her head. "But I'll wait, however long it takes, however much space you need. I'll wait." They sat like that as dawn light grew stronger, as the cabin warmed,
as the reality of survival settled into their bones. Finally, Kaelin spoke. We should leave soon. The storm's over, but there might be more of Vorik's wolves out there. Ones who didn't come inside. I need to get back to the capital, deal with the coup, secure the throne. And I need to... What, hide again? Run again? She didn't even know anymore. Come with me, he said, and it wasn't command, it was request. Come to the capital, not as mate, not as anything you're not ready for, but as... He searched for words. As healer, as advisor, as the woman with voice who could change everything about how this kingdom operates. Kaelin, you don't have to decide now, just don't disappear. Don't run back into the Shadowlands where I'll never find you. His arms tightened. Give me a chance to prove I can be worthy of what you've given me. Time, trust, life. Elara pulled back enough to see his face, found honesty there and hope, and the vulnerability he'd only shown her in fever and darkness. One condition, she said. Name it. The law changes, the decree about Omegas, it gets repealed. No more forced bonds, no more alphas claiming anyone who says no. Done, no hesitation. I'll announce it the day we arrive. The old law dies with Vorik. And you'll protect other rogues, give them choice, give them safety. Yes. And you won't try to claim me as mate until I'm ready, if I'm ever ready. His smile was sad but genuine. I'll wait forever if that's what it takes. Elara looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly tender king who'd crashed into her life as a dying wolf and emerged as something she'd never expected. A choice, a future, a terrifying possibility of something more than survival. Then I'll come with you, she said. For now. His kiss was gratitude and relief and promise wrapped together. Outside, the storm was over. The sun was rising. The world was waiting. Inside, something new was beginning. Chapter 9. They'd barely finished bandaging Elara's arm when the howls began. Not close, not yet, but echoing through the forest, carried on the morning air that had seemed so peaceful moments ago. Multiple voices, a pack, maybe more than one. Kaelin's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid. No. What? Elara moved to the shattered door, looking out at the snow-covered clearing. 6 wolf bodies lay scattered where they'd fallen, already half buried in white. Vorik's human corpse sprawled in the doorway, throat torn open, eyes staring at nothing. Those weren't all of them. Kaelin was beside her in 2 strides, his hand on her shoulder, pulling her back from the opening. Vorik was too smart to bring his only wolves into an unknown situation. How many? Those howls? He listened, head tilted, reading information she couldn't hear. At least 20, maybe 30. He left his main force outside the storm's edge, waiting for his signal. Elara's blood turned cold. They're coming to finish what he started. They don't know he's dead. They think he succeeded, that he's calling them in for the kill. His eyes met hers, gold bleeding through brown, the wolf rising in response to threat. When they find his body, when they realize I'm still alive and he failed, they'll attack anyway. She understood pack mentality. Vorik's beta wolves would rather die fighting than return to the capital admitting failure. They'll want revenge. And they'll want to eliminate witnesses. His hand tightened on her shoulder. You especially. You're the rogue who helped kill their beta. They'll make an example of you. The howls were getting closer. She could hear them clearly now, not just voices, but words shaped in the wolf tongue. Commands, strategies, the sounds of a hunting pack coordinating for a kill. Elara looked at the cabin. 1 room, shattered door, 6 bodies already inside. Them, injured, exhausted, outnumbered 5 to 1 at least. We can't fight that many, she said quietly. No. Kaelin's jaw clenched. We can't. Which is why you're going to run while I hold them off. Absolutely not. Elara. I said no. She turned to face him fully, meeting those gold-flecked eyes without flinching. We don't split up. We don't sacrifice. We survive together or not at all. That's non-negotiable. You'll die. Then I die on my feet instead of running. Her hand found his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palm. Besides, I'm not as helpless as you think. That thing I did with Vorich, the voice, I can feel it. It's still there, waiting. You don't know how to control it. Then I'd better learn fast. She could hear the pack now, not just howls but footfalls, dozens of paws crunching through snow. Minutes. They had minutes.
How does Alpha Voice work? I don't know. It's legend, myth, something from before the packs, before civilization. He was scanning the clearing, calculating angles and odds that didn't favor them. The old stories say moon-touched Omegas could command any wolf with a word, that their voice carried the goddess's authority. Moon-touched. Elara looked down at her hands. She'd always been wolfless, always been called broken. What if she wasn't broken at all? What if she was something else entirely? The first wolves broke through the tree line, 10 of them, 20, 30. More still coming. All massive, all trained fighters, all loyal to Vorich's memory and his claim to the throne. They saw the bodies, saw Vorich's corpse, saw Kaelin standing in the doorway, alive and defiant. The largest wolf, a gray-coated brute with scars covering his muzzle, shifted to human. Beta marked, Vorich's second. The king lives, he snarled, voice carrying across the clearing. Vorich failed. Vorich betrayed, Kaelin corrected, his voice dropping to that authoritative rumble that made even Elara's non-existent wolf want to submit. He poisoned his alpha, he broke pack law, he died a traitor's death. He died trying to save the kingdom from a weak king, the scarred beta roared. A king who makes laws that destroy pack hierarchy. A king who sympathizes with rogues. A king who's about to destroy you all if you don't leave, now. Kaelin's shift was beginning, bones starting to crack, fur rippling beneath skin. Last warning. The beta laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You're outnumbered 30-1, you're wounded. You're dying from silver poison, and you're protecting a rogue Omega who should have been claimed or killed years ago. He bared his teeth. We're not leaving until you're both dead. Then you're not leaving at all. Kaelin's shift completed, the massive black lichen emerging, filling the doorway, 9 feet of primal fury. The beta howled. The pack charged. Kaelin met them head-on, launching himself into the mass of fur and fangs with the kind of violence that only comes from protecting something more precious than your own life. He was magnificent, terrifying. A king in truth, fighting like the warrior that had earned him the title Wolf of War. But he was 1 against 30, and they were winning. Elara watched 3 wolves bring him down, watched him throw them off and kill 2 but get hit by 5 more. Watched him fighting with everything he had and knowing it wouldn't be enough. The scarred beta hung back, directing the attack, sending wave after wave at Kaelin while staying safely out of reach. Coward. Leader who sent others to die while he watched. Something hot and furious bloomed in Elara's chest, not fear, not panic. Rage. She'd spent 2 years hiding, 2 years being called weak, broken, worthless. 2 years believing that being wolfless made her less than nothing. She was done hiding. Elara stepped into the doorway, stepping over Vorich's corpse, walking out into the clearing where 30 wolves were trying to kill the man who'd become hers despite every intention otherwise. Enough! The word exploded from her, and this time it wasn't instinct or accident or fear-driven reflex. This time she reached for the power deliberately, grabbed it with both hands and pulled. Her voice echoed across the clearing, through the forest, carrying weight that had nothing to do with volume and everything to do with something ancient and absolute waking up after centuries of sleep. Every wolf froze, not just paused, froze completely, muscles locking, bodies going rigid mid-attack. Even Kaelin stopped, though his eyes remained aware, watching her with something between awe and terror. You will stop, Elara commanded, and the power flowing through her was intoxicating.
She could feel every wolf in the clearing, feel their shock, their confusion, their instinctive need to obey something older than pack law,
older than beta commands, older than anything they'd ever known. She was the voice, the authority, the will of the moon itself, made manifest in a woman they'd dismissed as worthless. The scarred beta recovered first, fighting against the compulsion with everything he had. His body shook with the effort, muscles straining, veins standing out on his neck. "You don't command us," he managed to force out through gritted teeth. "Don't I?" Elara walked toward him, her bare feet leaving prints in blood-stained snow, her voice never wavering. "Tell me, Beta, what do you feel when I speak? What's that thing crawling up your spine, making you want to drop to your knees and bare your throat?" His eyes widened, because he did feel it. They all felt it, the irresistible urge to submit. "That's not pack hierarchy," Elara continued, her voice dropping lower but carrying no less authority. "That's not beta to alpha, not omega to anyone. That's the old magic, the first law. The voice that existed before your packs, before your betas, before your precious hierarchy that lets you brutalize anyone weaker." She stopped in front of the beta, tilted her head up to meet his eyes. "Kneel." His legs buckled. He went down hard, knees hitting the snow, his body betraying him completely. Around the clearing, other wolves were dropping too, some fighting it, some surrendering to it, all of them forced to acknowledge what stood before them. A moon daughter, an omega with the goddess's voice. A myth made real. "You came here to kill a king who wanted to change the old ways," Elara said, her voice ringing out across the clearing. "To kill a man who realized that fear and domination aren't strength. They're the last resort of those too weak to inspire loyalty." She turned slowly, addressing all of them. "You came here to kill me because I refused to be claimed by an alpha who beat his mates. Because I chose freedom over security. Because I dared to think an omega's will mattered." Her voice rose, power crackling through it like lightning. "But I am not broken. I am not weak. I am not nothing. I am moon-touched. I am voice. And I say no more." The words echoed through the forest, through the bones of every wolf present, through the very air itself. "The old ways are dead," Elara declared. "The law that made me a fugitive dies here, in this clearing, with this beta who thought violence was leadership." She looked down at the scarred beta, still forced to his knees before her. "You have a choice. Swear loyalty to the king who lives. Accept that omegas are not property, not prey, not lesser. Accept that a female's voice carries as much weight as a male's roar." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "Or refuse. And learn what happens when you challenge someone with the goddess's authority behind every word." The beta's face was twisted with rage and humiliation, and finally, fear. Real fear. The kind that came from realizing you'd brought a hunting pack to kill a legend. He started, stopped, tried again. I swear loyalty to King Kalen." "Not to him." Elara's smile was sharp. "To both of us, because we rule together now. He with strength, me with voice. A new kind of kingdom, a better kind." She stepped back, releasing her hold slightly, enough that they could move, could breathe, could remember what having a choice felt like. "Swear. All of you. Or run. But if you run, you don't stop until you've left this kingdom entirely. Because if I see any of you again, if I hear that you've hurt a single omega, claimed anyone who said no, enforced the old ways." She let the power pulse once, making them all flinch. "I'll find you. And I'll use this voice to make you tear yourselves apart." Silence. Then, one by one, the wolves knelt. Some willingly, some reluctantly. But all of them acknowledging the shift, the change, the new reality that a wolfless omega had just rewritten pack law with nothing but her voice and will. The scarred beta, eyes downcast, neck bared in submission, spoke for them all. "We swear loyalty to King Kalen and Moon Voice Elara. The old ways die here, the new ways begin." Elara felt the power recede, felt exhaustion crash over her like a wave. Her legs gave out. And Kalen was there, shifted back to human, catching her before she hit the ground.
I've got you, he murmured against her hair, holding her close. You did it. You magnificent, impossible woman, you did it. Around them, 30 wolves stayed kneeling, heads bowed, waiting for permission to rise. Kalen looked at them, at the beta who'd come to kill him, at the pack that had sworn loyalty to something they'd witnessed rather than something they'd been commanded to obey. Rise, he said simply. Return to the capital. Tell them what happened here. Tell them King Kalen lives and the traitor Vorik fell. Tell them a new law is coming. He looked down at Elara, his eyes warm and proud and absolutely certain. Tell them the moon voice has returned. And she stands beside the king. Chapter 10. 3 weeks later, Elara stood in the throne room of the capital, wearing clothes she'd never imagined owning. Deep silver silk that caught the light like moonlight on water, embroidered with constellations in thread of gold. Her hair, clean and braided with silver chains, fell past her waist. She looked like someone important, felt like an imposter. The throne room was packed. Every alpha in the kingdom had come when Kalen sent the summons. Every beta. Representatives from every pack. All of them crowded into the massive hall with its soaring ceilings and marble floors, all of them staring at her. The wolfless Omega. The fugitive. The rogue who'd saved their king and commanded 30 warriors with a single word. Moon Voice, they called her now. Some with reverence, some with fear. All with respect they'd never have given her before. Kalen stood beside her, wearing full royal regalia, crown of silver and obsidian, robes of midnight blue, looking every inch the king. But when he glanced at her, checking silently to make sure she was okay, he was just the man who'd held her through nightmares and told her she was enough. Ready? He murmured. No, she admitted. Do it anyway. His smile was quick and warm. Then he turned to face his kingdom, and his voice rang out with absolute authority. 3 weeks ago, my beta betrayed me. Poisoned me. Left me to die in the Shadowlands during the Great Whiteout. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. He wanted the throne. Wanted to rule through fear and violence and the old ways that made might the only right. Silence. Every eye on him. He failed. Not because I was stronger, not because I was better prepared. Kalen's hand found Elara's, threading their fingers together in front of everyone. He failed because a rogue Omega, a woman my own laws had condemned to death or servitude, chose to save my life when she had every reason to let me die. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Confused. Uncertain, waiting to see where this was going. She showed me something I'd forgotten. Kalen's voice softened but lost none of its power. That mercy isn't weakness. That compassion isn't failure. That ruling through fear only creates the betrayers who eventually kill you. He released Elara's hand to address them fully. The old law dies today. The decree that forced Omegas to bind or die, it's over. Ended. Any Omega who chooses to remain unmated is under the crown's protection. Any Alpha who attempts to force a claim will be punished as a traitor. The murmurs grew louder, some supportive, some outraged. One Alpha, scarred and massive, stood from his seat. And what of pack hierarchy? He challenged. What of the natural order? Alphas lead. Betas enforce. Omegas submit. That's how it's always been. Then it's time for change. Kalen's voice cut through the protest. Because the natural order just tried to murder me. Because the natural order made me too blind to see my own beta plotting against me. Because the natural order made you dismiss the one person who could have saved you years ago. Elara finished, stepping forward. Her voice didn't carry the command of Moon Voice. She wasn't using the power, wasn't forcing them to listen. She was just speaking. How many of you have lost good people because they chose freedom over submission? How many talented healers, strategists, teachers did you drive away because they refused to be claimed? She looked around the room, meeting eyes that quickly dropped. How many future leaders did you break because they were born Omega instead of Alpha? An older woman, gray-haired and regal, stood from the beta section. You speak of theory, girl. But reality is harsh. Unmated wolves are vulnerable. The law protected them. The law made them property, Elara countered. Protection and possession aren't the same thing. Then what do you propose? The woman challenged. Chaos. Every wolf for themselves. No structure?
No order? I propose choice. Elara's voice was steady. I propose that an Omega who wants to bond does so freely, and an Omega who wants to live alone or with other Omegas or who wants to pursue knowledge instead of mating has that right. She glanced at Kaylin. I propose that strength is measured by more than dominance, that a kingdom ruled by fear is a kingdom waiting to fall. Pretty words from someone who commands wolves with magic voice. An alpha sneered from the back. Easy to talk about choice when you have power the rest of us don't. You think this is easy? Elara's laugh was sharp. You think having this power makes me special? Safe? I spent 2 years hiding in the Shadowlands, eating raw meat and sleeping in a cabin with no heat because your natural order said I was worthless without a wolf. Her voice rose. I was nothing. I was broken. I was less than dirt because I was born wrong according to your rules. And you know what? I'm still here, still standing, still surviving, not because of this power. I didn't even know I had it until 3 weeks ago. I'm here because I was strong enough to choose myself when no one else would. The throne room fell silent. The voice? Elara continued, her tone fierce. That's just proof that your natural order was never natural at all. That there are kinds of power you never recognized because you were too busy enforcing dominance hierarchies to see anything else. She turned to face the whole room. So yes, the law changes, Omegas have choice, and if that scares you, if that threatens your sense of order. Her eyes blazed. Maybe you were never as strong as you thought you were. Kaylin stepped beside her again, presenting united front. The law is changed by royal decree. Any alpha who challenges it challenges the crown. Any pack that refuses to comply will lose their territory and titles. He paused, letting that sink in. But I'm not just changing the law. I'm changing how we govern. Elara will sit beside me as Moon Voice, not as queen, not as mate, but as equal authority. Her word carries the same weight as mine. The protests erupted then, alphas shouting, betas objecting, the old guard bristling at the idea of sharing power with an Omega. Elara didn't use the voice, didn't force them to be quiet, just waited, letting them rage and roar and exhaust themselves against the simple fact that the decision was already made. Finally, the scarred beta who'd knelt in the clearing 3 weeks ago stood. The room quieted to hear him. I was there, he said, voice carrying, in the Shadowlands. I came with 30 wolves to kill the king and the rogue who saved him. He looked at Elara. She could have killed us all, could have commanded us to tear each other apart. Instead, she offered choice. Swear loyalty to the new way or leave. He knelt, right there in the throne room, in front of everyone. I swore then, I swear again now. Moon Voice Elara has my loyalty. The new way has my support. One by one, others knelt, some reluctantly, some readily, but the tide was turning. The old woman who'd challenged Elara earlier stood again. I don't kneel easily, girl, but, she sighed, I lost a daughter 20 years ago, brilliant healer. Refused to mate an alpha who beat his first 3 wives. The old law called her rogue. She died in the Shadowlands before her 25th winter. Her voice cracked. If your new way could have saved her, if it can save others like her, then you have my support. More stood, more pledged. Not all, some alphas stormed out, some betas followed, but enough. More than enough. When the last oath was sworn, when the room finally settled into something like acceptance, Kaylin turned to Elara. You don't have to stay, he said quietly, for her ears only. This wasn't part of our bargain. You agreed to come to the capital, but not to rule beside me. If you want to leave, to go back to the Shadowlands, or anywhere else. Kaylin, she took his hand. Shut up. His eyebrows rose. I'm not leaving. I'm not running. She squeezed his fingers. I'm choosing. This. You. Us. The terrifying possibility of building something better than what came before. You're sure? I'm terrified, she corrected, but I'm sure. He pulled her close, right there in front of the entire kingdom, and kissed her. not claiming, not possessing, just loving, openly and honestly, the woman who'd saved him in every way a person could be saved. When they broke apart, his forehead resting against hers, he whispered, "I love you. I should have said it before. I love you, Elara, my moon voice, my equal, my choice." "I love you too," she whispered back, "my wolf king, my impossible, my home." Around them, the kingdom watched their future being written in real time. A rogue and a king, a voice and a crown. The old ways dying, and the new ways being born in a throne room that would never be the same. Outside, the sun set over the capital in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, something better than survival was beginning, something that looked like hope. Epilogue, 3 months later. The reports came in steadily. 17 packs had implemented the new law. 8 more were considering it. 3 had split, the younger wolves embracing change, the older ones clinging to tradition. 2 alphas who'd tried to force claims were stripped of titles and exiled. 1 had been publicly challenged by his own son, who became the new alpha by proving strength came from protecting, not dominating. And the rogues were coming in. Slowly at first, then in steady streams. Omegas who'd been hiding for years, some alone, some in groups. All of them looking for the moon voice who'd rewritten the laws that made them prey. Elara met with every one. Listened to their stories, helped them find places, some in packs, some in newly formed Omega-run communities, some as advisors to the crown itself. She'd discovered that moon voice wasn't just commanding obedience, it was hearing the voices that had been silenced, speaking for those who'd been told they had no right to speak. "You're good at this," Kaylin said one evening, finding her in the library that had become her favorite room, floor-to-ceiling books, comfortable chairs, windows overlooking the gardens. "At what?" She looked up from the report she'd been reading, a proposal for an Omega-led healing house that would train anyone who wanted to learn, not just those claimed by packs. "Ruling." He settled beside her, pulling her feet into his lap, thumbs rubbing circles into her arches in the casual intimacy they developed over 3 months of living and working together. Being the voice that needed hearing. "I'm just doing what should have been done years ago. You're changing the world." He kissed her ankle, eyes warm. "And you're doing it without forcing anyone. That power you have, you barely use it." Because real change doesn't come from forcing obedience, she set down the report. It comes from giving people a reason to believe something better is possible. "Marry me." The words fell into the quiet like stones into still water. Elara blinked. "What?" "Marry me." He shifted to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Not because of the mate bond. Not because of politics or optics or what the kingdom expects. Marry me because I love you. Because you're my equal in every way that matters. Because I want to spend the rest of my life building this better world beside you." Her throat tightened. "Kaylin, I know we said we'd wait. That we'd take it slow. That you needed time to be sure this wasn't just the bond talking." He kissed her knuckles. "But it's been 3 months. 3 months of watching you be brilliant and fierce and kind. 3 months of falling more in love with you every single day. 3 months of being certain that mate bond or not, I would choose you, every time, forever." Tears spilled over. Happy ones, terrified ones. All of it tangled together. "Yes," she whispered. His eyes widened. "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you." She pulled him up, pulled him close, kissed him hard. "Yes to everything, to partnership, to building something better, to choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." She pulled back just enough to see his face. "To being the moon voice beside the wolf king, to rewriting every stupid rule that said we couldn't work, to proving that an Omega and an Alpha can rule as equals. To loving each other despite every reason we shouldn't," he added, grinning. "Because of every reason we shouldn't," she corrected. He kissed her again, deep and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers in the gesture that had become theirs alone. "My moon," he murmured.
My wolf, she answered. Outside, the kingdom continued its slow transformation. Inside, two people who'd saved each other were beginning the next chapter of their impossible love story. A story that started with a dying wolf, a foolish woman, and a terrible idea, and ended with a kingdom transformed, laws rewritten, and a love that proved mercy was the strongest magic of all.